Ladies and gentlemen, I am Corione, your witch in residence here on YouTube. Joining me today is, of course, the wise, the powerful, the amazing Kamran Pasha. And we decided that because both of us actually really enjoyed the Barbie movie, we would, sit down and review it together because, that's what you guys ask for. You guys want to see, diverse opinions on a diverse range of subjects. And yeah, let's dig into it. So, okay, for me personally, I thought this was a really solidly put together movie.
Mhm,
Shockingly,
mhm. Yeah,
surprisingly well put together. Especially when you consider that most of the cast is like SNL alumni, or at least that's what it felt like.
sure.
Um, I did think that the visuals were tight. I mean, it was an awful lot of pink for me, but then, uh, but Cameron, I'm curious, just in general, what your thoughts on the movie were.
Well, this has got to be my favorite movie of the year, and I include that with Oppenheimer, which I truly loved. Which maybe we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about them maybe at the end of the video about
Yeah.
some of the similar themes they both have, which is quite surprising to people. But I mean, I love this movie. When I first said that opinion a week ago, which feels like 10 years ago, I was loudly mocked and called all kinds of very interesting names because a lot of people had heard a narrative from others that movie had certain political leanings and certain blah blah blah. We'll talk about that today, but I love this movie. Maybe it's because I think I understand this movie, and I certainly believe I understand what Greta Gerwig was trying to accomplish. I'm not so sure most of its critics understand this film, and I want to start the conversation by maybe asking, what is a satire? Because to me, this movie is a very clear, very obvious satire, and the way I understand satire as a filmmaker myself is that it is a film. You can do satirical books and plays and things, but let's talk about film. So it is a film that exaggerates certain ideas to such an extreme that you begin to deconstruct the idea itself and see if it actually has worth and value. And we see that a lot in great satires like Doctor Strangelove, right? Dr.
Hmm.
Ellen Strangelove, which is about if you just look at the surface of that film, it seems to be a pro-war, pro-nuclear war, militaristic, extremely aggressive movie. But I
Right.
don't think I mean, I have to go back and look at the cultural reaction to the moment in the 60s when it came out, but I think most people got, maybe because it was Peter Sellers was in it, maybe they got that it was a comedy and that it was a satire and it was mocking in a very ruthless way the kind of extreme militarism that we'd been in for a few decades then, and had developed nuclear weapons. So we had developed the hydrogen bomb, which links into Oppenheimer. We see the development of that as well as the atom bomb here. And so that was an obvious satire. Blazing Saddles and all of Mel Brooks's great movies
Yeah,
are
or
satires,
amazing satire. I would even add in the Starship Troopers movie.
which I think was misunderstood. In fact, I'll be
It
honest,
absolutely was.
when I
Yeah.
saw it, and when I first saw it, I went to see it because I had a thing for Denise Richards and she was in there and all this stuff. And
How
I
can you
didn't.
not, though? Really,
I
right?
still did. I once walked past her in Brentwood. I was like, is that just Denise Richards walking by me? So, yes. So, but then I did enjoy the movie, but I was like, wow, it's a pretty fascistic movie. It's all about, pro-war propaganda. And so, for all my criticizing those who didn't get Barbie, in my opinion, I also didn't get Starship Troopers. And it took me quite some time to realize that I think the intention of that movie is to really deconstruct militarism and extreme war propaganda and us versus them mindset, similarly to Doctor Strangelove. And so um,
Yeah.
I didn't get it for a long time. I didn't dislike the movie, but I didn't get it. And I think, unfortunately, Barbie, there were people that didn't get it. I think the
Yeah.
vast majority of the audience got it, but there were people in the commentator class that didn't get it. And I use commentator class because that extends beyond YouTube. You're seeing a lot of political commentators making comments about it. I think very ill-informed comments about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Some of the major newspapers as well.
yeah,
I've been
you're
seeing
getting
it
you're
too.
getting all this commentary, and I've seen disappointment on the left where they kind of understood that this is a bit of a mockumentary, and so they were disappointed that it punched in their direction. I don't think a lot of people are realizing that you're getting some of the left saying, "Hey, is she making fun of us?" Which kind of is, right? And so I think that the unfortunate reality of this movie is that it's tainted with the fact that not satire isn't always obvious to people, but it's
Yeah.
tainted with a lot of political narratives around men and women, about sexual dynamics, about relationship dynamics, about power, that has been really quite insidious for the last decade. So I understand where people were primed to misunderstand this movie, but I do think they
Yeah.
misunderstood it. And so today we'll talk about why I think it works, why maybe you think it works.
Yeah, so for me, when I was watching this movie, my initial takeaway, like you can look at this from the surface level of, a mom needing to escape reality and playing with Barbies because it takes her back to a time when things were simpler. But she can't escape her own reality, and she literally drags her reality into the Barbie verse, right? You can look at it from that level, but you can also take it deeper, and you can look at it from the, that neither, neither male nor female can be allowed 100% control over society, because neither of them work. And I thought that was a fantastic message to
Well,
take
thank
away.
you. And you see, it's interesting. I was on a video with our lovely friend right, who's got
Yep.
a lovely her lovely channel, Positive Fandom, which has many similar positivity as your channel does, right?
Yep.
And we talked about this, and this was, people were quite shocked that we both loved it, and and we talked about how one of the people who sent in a super chat was saying, I get what you're trying to say, that it's ultimately about, Ken, which is one of the arcs we'll talk about. Ken
Right.
goes from being in the shadow of Barbie to rebelling against that shadow to coming to a healthy medium where I don't need to be in her shadow. I don't need to be fighting her. I just need to be me and have my own identity, which is, I think, an important lesson for everyone. Said,
Absolutely, it is.
but the super chat was, but that's an example of feminism. A woman has to teach him that. I said, hey man, who taught you how to walk? Who's your mom? I mean, come
Yeah.
on. I mean, the idea that men and women are not interdependent is nonsense. We are complementary, and I think it's very unhealthy to say that we do not need each other. I think that's been the message of the latest waves of feminism, and frankly, that's become the message of some of the more extreme, people on what are called, the red pill manosphere world. Which leads to the men going their own way movement, MGTOW. And what are they going their own way from? They're going their own way from women, which I don't think is healthy. I mean, life
No, I
doesn't
mean,
work without men and women together. It just doesn't work.
well, that's it. Look, at the end of the day, I do absolutely respect the guys that have made that decision to go their own
Mhm,
way, because, a lot of them are in a position where they've been in really bad relationships
mhm,
where, the the women involved suddenly thought that, like, the reverse of the 1950s style home was somehow going to be healthy for everybody.
mhm.
So I do understand that. I don't necessarily agree with it myself. I
Well, I
personally
think
am
it's a
more of
stage in
the
the journey. I think,
yeah,
especially if you've been hurt, you've been through a painful divorce, and you have a relationship. I understand that. But I think getting
yeah.
stuck at that place is not a good place to be stuck
No,
at.
it's not. And I think when you take a look, yes, Ken did, or Barbie did teach Ken to, kind of stand on his own. But Ken taught Barbie some important lessons too. Ken taught Barbie that it wasn't okay to not notice people, that
Mhm.
it wasn't okay to stand on top of others, that that balance point need to be reached. So really they were teaching each other, which is how
Absolutely.
it should be,
It's
you
very
know?
clear at the end. Ken says those things, and that he's hurt. Because,
Yeah.
and people saying, "Well, that's an emasculated Ken." I'm like, "Hey, buddy, Ken has always been emasculated. That's the joke. Ken is
Yeah.
an accessory to Barbie, and the movie points that out. He's never
Yeah.
had an independent existence of his own. He's created to give Barbie, a secondary partner, right?
Right.
And he points out the pain of that, and that she does treat him poorly in the
Yeah.
first half of this movie. And people say, well, that's the message. No, that's not the message. The message, first of all, Ken, because this is shown as the imagination of a child. My sister had Barbies. People,
Yeah.
and Ken isn't her equal in the little girl's imagination.
No.
And so she treats Ken the way little girls treat Ken, as an appendage doll. And he tells her, that hurt me. That
Yeah.
you excluded me. You didn't let me come to the all Barbie parties. And she realizes, you're right. I was wrong. There's no
Yeah.
reason I can't have you over, because they're dolls. They're not going to do any fooling around. That's one of the jokes of the movie, right? They don't
That
have any
that
type of body parts. They just have connections. So why exclude someone?
Yeah, it was actually one mentioned a few times as very, very humorous points
Mhm.
in the movie,
Yeah.
and it worked absolutely well there. But the point is they were teaching each other, and at the end of it, they become far more of a balance point to each other. Now, of course, in the movie, Barbie does decide to join the real world, having been too touched by the real world and its real world issues. But to me, this movie also works on a different level, and that is to show a woman growing up,
Yeah.
right? Because at the beginning, she's thinking like a little girl. She's
Or a
behaving like
narcissistic teen, which we
or a
also see
narcissistic,
that character. Yeah.
right? And then her world comes crashing down. And she is the one that ultimately has to build the world, well, partially anyway, that she has to be part of building the world she wants to be in. And if and that's a positive message too, right? Like, at the end of the day, we all eventually have to grow up, right?
Yeah.
We can't remain in the toy verse forever, right? We
And
have
if
to
we
get
try to
up.
go back to that, there are consequences because this movie is about an adult mom trying to escape her problems by going back to her Barbies. And guess what that does? That creates problems for the Barbies because
Absolutely.
adults shouldn't be playing with them. So adult ideas start entering their minds that a child wouldn't have and start screwing up their world.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. Like, I know that there's going to be a lot of people that as soon as they hear patriarchy, they immediately assume it's a feminist movie and whatnot. I would actually argue that this is one of the very few times I've ever heard the words patriarchy uttered, and it actually worked as something not quite feminism. It worked as the counterpoint to the hyperfeminism.
Correct.
And by eventually both of them realizing that this, the third or fourth wave hyperfeminism, the girls must be more equal than boys kind of mentality, and the patriarchy, boys must be more equal than girls mentality, doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And this movie says it. For anyone's like, well, Cameron, Michael, you're misreading it. I was like, they say it. They say it in dialogue at the end of the movie. Ruth, the
Absolutely.
creator of Barbie, we meet her wonderfully. Rhea Perlman is wonderful playing her.
Oh, goodness, that was a fantastic moment.
And she's wonderful. What a great actress. And I'm so glad to see her back in the game. I haven't seen her since Cheers. And here she is. And she's perfect in this. And then she says it. She says it. The patriarchy is just a word we've made up so that we don't have to be honest with each other, that the world is too complicated and we use boxes like the patriarchy. That's something I hear men's rights activists say coming out of this
Exactly.
elderly woman's mouth, and it's come on, guys. She says it. She said, you got the line you wanted. Stop using words like the patriarchy, Barbie. It isn't real
That's
because life
it.
is too complex.
That's exactly the point. And that's what's fantastic about this movie is it makes it very clear that these issues, and let's be honest, in the real world, there are some gender issues that exist. There's a lot of
Human
stuff.
beings, it's hard. Men and women have always had power issues. Going back to our primitive cave days, we've always
Right.
had power issues.
Right. And look, the point is though, it doesn't shy away from that life is hard message. It embraces it and says, yes, life is hard, but we can rise to these challenges, which is what we should be doing, right? It makes it very clear that communication, that discussing things is vital to moving forward as a society.
And most importantly, honesty. Until
Yes,
they're all able to say what really they're thinking, we don't have any progress forward in their relationships.
exactly. Now I'm gonna. There's a couple of other actors that I really do want to touch on,
Yeah,
other
please.
than the main two, because you mentioned Rhea Perlman, who was fantastic in this. She felt like the grandma I kind of want.
Yeah.
But the another actor I actually want to call out is Will Ferrell. Now,
Oh,
I famously am not a Will Ferrell person. I usually don't find
really?
his humor. I just
Okay.
I don't mind him as a human being. I just don't find his humor to match my sense of humor.
Okay.
He worked really well here. As
And
this
I'll tell
kind of
you why.
like, okay, go for it, please.
I'll tell you why. So Will Ferrell is he is his palette, his actor's palette, is he plays a lovable goofball who does stupid things but has a heart of gold. And
Right.
that's what he is here. And guess what? That's the imaginary Mattel CEO in this movie who is being used as a symbol of the imaginary patriarchy. And even he is silly, he's stupid. And people are like, well, look, you're making men look stupid. It's like, no, because guess what? Even this guy loves Barbie. And that's the thing, is he actually loves Barbie. He wants to put her back in her box so he can promote her to little girls. And one of the funniest moments in the movie, and I don't want to reveal all the jokes, but funniest moments in the movie is that a new version of Ken they start selling it, right? And let's just say it does quite well with the marketplace, right? The new Ken. And initially our CEO Will Ferrell resists it because I came here to sell Barbie.
That's it.
Then, of course, Ken makes a lot of money, so he was going to go with that, right? Because that's the funny joke of it. But it works because he is not, a demonic figure, the patriarchy. He's a lovable guy who actually likes the product he's selling.
That's it. And I mean, gee, wouldn't it be awesome if more CEOs actually liked the product they were selling? If certain heads of certain studios and located in San Diego actually liked the product they were supposed to be shipping out. But
imagine what would happen if someone came and said, let's reinvent this franchise. And you're like, no, it works fine the way it is.
Yeah.
let's work this franchise. We don't need to. I like it the way it is. Imagine if a certain president had said that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Weird. But yeah, like this movie works. And I also love, one of the things I thought they did very, very well is how they separated Barbie world from the real world.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the visual palette is very different, and you immediately see it.
Exactly. But I also thought it was very interesting that you have the real world of like the real Malibu Beach, and you have the Barbie Malibu Beach. Yep. But you also have the Mattel headquarters, and I don't know if you caught this, but the Mattel headquarters is right in between. It's not the 2D-ness of Barbie, right? And it's not really the 3D-ness of the regular outside world.
Yeah, and it's not the real Mattel headquarters. It is, you're right. It's what we call in study of religion the liminal phase, the linking point between two dimensions.
Exactly. And that was a very, very interesting subconscious slant that that Greta chose to take in this. And I really appreciate it, because we don't just have the two worlds, really. We have the two worlds, and Mattel is the bridging point.
Yeah.
Right. And that was important.
No, it was. I mean, look, there's so much here that is unexpected, that's remarkable. You mentioned Greta. So Greta Gerwig is the director. She is, let me just say, someone who's worked in the industry for a couple of decades. She's had a phenomenal reputation as a filmmaker. Her reputation is not about her politics. I don't hear people talking about Greta Gerwig's politics. I hear people talking about her craftsmanship. I heard people talking about her commitment to the art of filmmaking. That's what I hear. People say this is a woman that takes this very seriously, the craft of the job. It's very different from, let's say, a certain talented filmmaker like Rian Johnson, who decided, I'm just going to film a first draft of a movie that I don't care about, right? Yeah. And you see a different outcome there, right? Whereas here, we've had many critiques of The Last Jedi, but I think it's a let's just say shabbily constructed film, even though it's beautifully shot, beautiful cinematography. The story and the elements within are very shabby. They show no effort of thinking about it, certainly no effort to understand the context in relationship to everything else. But then you have Barbie, which is every single frame is intentional. Every little item that you see on screen is intentional. Things that you see in Barbie world are set up and they're paid off as jokes in the real world an hour later. Every moment is intentionally set up. This is someone who crafted this with a laser pick.
Yeah. Everything was deliberate. Every position of every actor was deliberate. The, for lack of a better term, War of Kens scene. Everything that happened in there was very deliberate. That led into a dance number that made me feel a lot like it might have been lifted from West Side Story a little. But that was the point. Right. And it worked brilliantly doing it. Go for it.
I want to say this because as you're talking, a sudden alert came on my screen, and I would like to read this. I won't reveal the name of the person, but it's one of my members of my Patreon who
Sure.
was initially resistant to Barbie's and heard bad things about it. And I said, why don't you trust me and give it a shot? And you don't have
Yep.
to like it.
Yep.
And she just sent this message to me, which I'm going to ask her to post on the general Patreon. So I'm going to read it without identifying her because I don't necessarily have her permission to identify her. But this is what I'm just going to read what she sent me, which is, "Hi Cameron. Oh my God, I just got out of Barbie and I'm stunned. Barbie is a rather amazing movie. I took a huge journey through this movie, went in expecting, to putting it mildly, not love it. As I watched, I had so many thoughts and so much self-analysis throughout, and I was sobbing by the end, which happened to me too. Literally tears running down my cheeks. As the mother of a daughter and son, the mother-daughter stuff hit me deep. I am so surprised by it. I give full credit to Ms. Gerwig, great filmmaker, judging by what she did. My daughter, who saw it at the premiere in LA, said she was crying at the end. I didn't understand her. I do now. I'm better for watching it. That's how I feel. And I'm flabbergasted how much I changed from start to finish. Not sure I've ever experienced that kind of change during a movie. You were absolutely right. I was absolutely wrong. Happy to tell you that. I want to see it again. P.S. My daughter is so happy. We feel the same way about the movie. Me too." So there, my friend, is a heartfelt reaction of someone walking out of a theater as we're filming this video.
Yeah. And this, and that's ultimately one of the things that I think this film does better than just about anything I've run into in a long time. This movie highly encourages a level of self-reflection, of sitting down and going, am I being reasonable to the people around me? Do I care? Right? If I have somebody that I think has feelings for me, have I addressed those with him or her in a way that's respectful? Right? Have I inadvertently caused someone to become a dude bro? Right? Like, those sort of things. And I think that's fantastic. I want to, there's a couple of other actors in here that I think do deserve special mention. Look,
that's good. This is an ensemble cast. This is an ensemble cast, and everyone,
everyone brought it.
Everyone brings their A game.
Yeah. Look, and I really got to call out, Ryan Gosling. He did fantastic here. This was a character
that was role. It's
a
hard role because you can easily be mocking yourself, but he's not doing that.
No. Look, there were so many times that he could have taken this off a cliff and either played something too campy or too straight. And he found this perfect middle ground that he was able to walk the line of. Mm-hmm. And that's hard when you're just acting. When you have to do musicals, when you have to do dance numbers while keeping that line, that's a challenge. And this guy is clearly a triple threat, and did an absolutely fantastic job with it.
And I want to compare one of my other all-time favorite movies is First Man, where Ryan Gosling plays Neil Armstrong. Completely opposite character here. Neil Armstrong is famous for being stoic, unemotional, old-school cowboy masculine male who keeps his feelings in check. In fact, the entire movie is about him being unable to process the death of his baby daughter. And he goes in the space program to try to not deal with it. And finally, he has to deal with it when he's alone on the moon and there's no other human beings there, and he can allow himself to cry. Completely opposite journey, of Ken. And this actor can do it.
Yeah. Fantastic. I also want to shout out Margot Robbie. Look, she gets a lot of flack because a lot of people think that the only thing she can play is Harley Quinn. No. This is the farthest I think she could get from Harley Quinn, really, because Barbie could easily be sexualized. She's not.
This is very innocent. It's a very innocent thing. If people have been misreading this saying it's sexualized, I'm like, no. The only reason it has a PG-13, honestly, the only reason is because it once uses the word vagina and once uses the word penis, because it's the running joke that's been going on for 50 years that these dolls are not anatomically correct, right? It just uses the word. It doesn't use it in a salacious way. It doesn't use slang, ugly slang for bodily organs. It uses once in relationship to that reality and that joke. Otherwise, this is a PG movie. I mean, that's the only thing I think they put 13 on there, because they're like, someone might have to explain what those words mean to an 8-year-old. Otherwise, it's completely relatable, and it's complete. And she is so innocent.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I've been a little reticent to show my daughter this. She's 11. But the only reason why I've been reticent to do it is because I don't necessarily want her to have to deal with the real world stuff of growing up and, that kind of piece of
Then
it.
wisely PG-13 was correct, because
Yeah.
and why is the main child in this movie a teenager, a 13, 14-year-old girl who's already disconnected from her Barbie, in the process disconnected from her mother, and is bitter and being and spouting all the
And
dumb
just
political nonsense we did at that age.
disenchanted with life at this
Yeah.
point, right?
Because
And
what's happening to her? Her body is changing in ways she doesn't understand. She still, in some ways, is emotionally a child, but is now dealing with an adult physical situation. That's why junior high school is the worst period for most people. Certainly was for me,
Yeah.
because and you become embittered because you don't understand what's happening to you. Right?
Yeah.
By high school, you're kind of now flowing with this new period of your life. That transitional moment is why this child, why it's a tween, that is the star of the movie.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't actually recall that actress's name, the one who plays the daughter, but
I
she
think she's
brought it to.
relatively new. I'll look her up. I
Yeah.
think she's relatively new.
Yeah, I mean, I will find her IMDb and probably put it right about,
Mhm.
there. But, she did a fantastic job,
Yeah.
right? She absolutely did a fantastic job of bringing this character through, somebody who is disconnected from their parents, somebody who is, pretty dejected with reality, and being forced to view the unreality of the situation woke her up and allowed her to dream again, right? The Barbie kind of became part of her life now as well. And I thought that was fantastic message too, right? That we can still have fun with our toys, our childhood, what have you, so long as we're able to keep it in the right context.
And
Right?
the young woman's name,
You
by the
know,
way, is Ariana Greenblatt. That is her name, Ariana Greenblatt.
oh,
And she's done. She's
well,
been in some big movies, smaller roles, but this is going to be a break for her.
yeah, I hope so. I truly hope we see more of her. I stand
She
firmly
also
behind it.
grows, because
Yeah.
you start off as the grumbly, unhappy, woke teenager who learns to appreciate her mother,
Mhm.
her Barbie, and
Yeah.
her own imagination and her family. You see her, the actress is wonderful. You see her go from the bitter, grouchy, junior high school girl to someone who rediscovers wonder. It's on her face.
That's it. And I often say that the best definition I've ever found for magic is the creation of wonder. And that we see a magical transformation from her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this movie really does have a lot to it. And it's really a lot about life, which I think is why it works so well with Oppenheimer.
Yeah. So why don't we take a moment to compare? Because when I did my initial review, it was a review of Barbenheimer. I went to see
Yeah.
Barbie first, then I went to see Oppenheimer second, and I came home and I wrote my review at 3 a.m. in the morning, thinking woke up the next morning to lots of angry responses to that review. but what the point of the review that I made is that these movies are inextricably linked. Shockingly,
Yes.
they're inextricably linked. They ultimately are looking at different aspects of the human condition and talking about it in some ways that are quite parallel.
Absolutely. I did the Barbenheimer experience as well.
Mhm.
Did Barbie first, then did Oppenheimer. Um, and I will say this, guys, while it was a fascinating thing to do them a day at a time, because Cameron and I are professionals, right? We literally do this, as part of our careers. Professionally watching movies like this. Not everyone can sit for 6 hours and watch, movies straight through. The human bladder was not designed to do this. So, but what I saw was that Oppenheimer is really, it's about death, right? It's about it's about the destruction of a human being after he, destroyed the old world and created a new one.
Mhm.
And Barbie is really about my world is dying and I'm going to fight to save it.
Right. But the interesting thing is this: the moment we know something is off with Barbie is when she asks the other Barbies in the middle of their wonderful dance-a-thon, "Have you ever thought about death?"
Yeah.
It's about that too. And Rhea Perlman brings it full circle at the end, because she's a ghost. The actual founder Barbie has passed away, and creator Barbie. So she's a ghost, and they acknowledge that she's actually good. They acknowledge in the movie that she's a ghost, right?
Yeah.
And she's a ghost who's haunting Mattel still. And she tells her, Barbie, if you think of being human, understand that being human means death,
Yeah.
right?
And
That's
it's
the whole point.
yeah, at times it sucks, but there are joys there. There's wonder there. There is life. And yes, there is death, but you can't have that without a chance at life and
No, you
really
can't
living.
appreciate it. You can't
Yeah.
appreciate it, which is one of the lessons. Why does Barbie not appreciate her existence? Because there is no end to it. Every day is the same day. Every
Yeah.
day you wake up, it's the same day until something happens in this movie to change that day. She's never experienced life. And now she's been thrown out of that day, but she has a chance to go back to the way things were. And instead, she chooses to move forward.
She's actually got she's actually got several chances,
Please tell me.
right? Well, she could have been boxed by
Yeah.
Will Ferrell's character
Yeah,
and
that
gone
chance. She
gone
could have
back
gone right
there.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. There was, of course, at the end of the movie, after talking to the ghost, she
Mhm.
could have gone back to everything being status quo. She could have even decided that, her feet being, not pointed all the time was not the end of the world either, right?
Again, that's
So,
superficiality. I look here. I am. Look behind me. That's Santa Monica. Which much of this movie was filmed in this park. I wish I'd been there.
oh,
I didn't know when. I wish I'd been
right?
there, gone to see like the filming and clap, for Margot Robbie. But it was filmed in the park. I mean, I know. I mean, I walked by the areas it's filmed in. I was seeing my home. I mean, I was
Yeah.
seeing it blew me away. So it was filmed in this park, right? And it is. Let's just say it's a superficial place. I live with a lot of very attractive, um, let's just say inflated and enhanced people who are quite
Mhm.
lovely, but it's not real, right?
Yeah.
And but they're so insecure about them that they have to do these adjustments, plastic surgery, and other things to feel good about themselves. And Barbie is a commentary on that. When she loses her natural arch, it is the end of the world for her, literally.
Yeah. And that's fantastic. I was watching this and I was see with Oppenheimer, it's he doesn't go through the hero's journey, right? He goes through Prometheus's journey, really.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a very complex film because Barbie is redeemed at the end. Ken is redeemed. Everyone's redeemed in Barbie because
Yeah.
it's a heartfelt movie. I'm not so sure Oppenheimer is redeemed by
No.
it's not.
No, but what I was going to say is Barbie
Yes,
does go through the hero's journey,
yes.
right? She goes through every step of the hero's journey, and that's one of the reasons why I think this movie really works. Because yes, it's tackling heavy-duty issues. Really, at the end of the day, it is. But we like the character because it's taking the arc that we want her to take, right? Where she has to go on that journey, where she has to face those trials along the way of that journey, where she's tempted to turn around, but she gets through it and comes back changed and changed for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And she saved her society. Perhaps, who knows, even maybe made it better by the end of it.
That's. I mean, I hope there will not be a sequel. I think sadly there will be. They've made too much money.
Yeah.
I hope Greta Gerwig does a sequel. I fear that anyone other than her will not be able to live up to the majesty of this because some people are saying, well, why didn't Ken do this and why didn't Ken do that and why wasn't America Ferrera's husband we only see a couple of times, sort of goofy guy, why isn't he on the journey? First of all, it's not his journey, it's the journey of a mother and a daughter, but it is certainly primed that you can explore now Ken's journey, which would then bring in the husband and all these other men that we see. Maybe Will Ferrell in the second movie would become the center of it and going back to his experience. Why did this guy become the leader of a woman's doll company, right? That had been founded by a woman, right? And so I think there's a lot to explore with the men in a sequel, and I just hope it would be Greta that does it because I don't trust anyone else to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and like I don't know who else you would get to do it. I mean, I do know who I would want to write it, because, Kamran, I feel like you would have a good vision for it, but
well, I'm honored. I'll be honest with you. And I, you know me, I'm not a humble person, but as I watched this film, I said, man, I wish I could have written this movie, but I don't think I would have done as good a job. I mean, this is she and her husband Noah Baumbach, who's a very successful filmmaker in his own right, wrote this movie, and the screenwriting is A-list screenwriting because it is so symbolic. It is so complex. It has so many layers of meaning. I was like, I don't think I could have done this. I wish I could, but I'm going to learn from this.
Well, that's it, right? And I mean, that's ultimately what I feel the most important thing that we do with movies and really storytelling at all is we entertain, but there should also be a lesson there somewhere. There should be a point.
Well, that's what your channel is all about. One of the things I love. What have we learned? These are your wonderful videos that people should be subscribing to watch. What have we learned from this?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to learn from here. I think there's an absolute, key moments. And I think watching it with the shadow of Oppenheimer hanging over it only accentuates this movie. It only makes it better. And it only makes Oppenheimer better when you watch the two of them, right? In a lot of ways, this mirrors the kind of wonderful duality that we want in society, right? We want to have, girls to have girly things. We want guys to have guy things, and we want to have things that we can share and explore together, right? And none of that is bad. None of that is wrong, right? Actual equality is the thing that we should be shooting for. And at the end of this movie, we see some actual equality. And, at the end of Oppenheimer, this guy has been pretty broken down. But if anything, his sacrifices help to build a better world.
Well,
right?
they can. That's the potential, because nuclear power has value. It has value. I'm of the camp, this might be controversial. I'm of the camp that I think nuclear power is probably one of the safer and least environmentally damaging forms of power that we have. I prefer it to coal and other things. And I don't think Europe is making the right choice in moving away from nuclear power. I think it's not, that's my opinion. I don't think it's correct. And so there have been nuclear accidents. There have also been a lot of horrific damage created by fossil fuels and other things, and some of the, we're now getting electric cars, but where are the electric cars coming from? Their batteries are coming from having African slaves digging up special, minerals. That's not great. So we have to look at the social impact of that. So I think, what's there. And then, let me make an interesting point that's not actually, it's implied in the movie. I had to do more research. In this, because I was so fascinated by the story that it's not actually stated up front. It's implied. So the core of the movie is a race. It's a race between Oppenheimer and a figure we only briefly meet, who's the other great genius of quantum physics, Werner Heisenberg, right? Yeah. Who was the head of the German project, right? Yeah. And Heisenberg and they at least had been socially friends before all this had happened. And Heisenberg is one of the greatest minds of all time. His Heisenberg uncertainty principle is the core of quantum physics. It tells us that we can't know everything inherently to the cosmos. It's brilliant. And so, but then he was forced by Hitler. Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to work for me. You have no choice, right? And so the movie has a wonderful meeting between Oppenheimer and I think the actor who played Heisenberg was only there for a minute, and he captured the screen. He was wonderful. And then they reference him because they are in a race with this ghost, with this Heisenberg, who they learn is now running the German program, and he's a direct intellectual equal of Oppenheimer. He could pull it off, right? Yeah. There's a moment in the film where they found out through a spy who interacted with Heisenberg later the direction that Heisenberg is going in, that they're going off of graphite as, again, coolant or whatever they're doing.
No, they're not using graphite as the medium. They're using deuterium or heavy water.
Heavy water. And then that was a step that the American nuclear scientists had figured out. No, that's not going to lead to a bomb, right? That's not going to work.
It's going to lead to a sustained reaction.
Correct.
A reactor.
A reactor. They make that point, but they dismiss it. But they didn't, and the movie doesn't go deeper into that, right? But it's just a jubilation of we are ahead of them. We are ahead of the Germans. Now, historians now know that Heisenberg intentionally sabotaged the Nazi bomb project. Yep. He did it on purpose. The reason we know that, he was captured at the end of World War II. He was held for interrogation for months in essentially a camp of nuclear scientists, of German nuclear scientists that were held for months. Their rooms, their cells were bugged. So anytime they talked privately, it was all recorded. And we know from his private conversation that he didn't know were being recorded with his fellow captured nuclear scientists. We know he intentionally sabotaged it. He believed making a nuclear bomb was an immoral use of this knowledge, and he didn't expect the Americans to do it. And so we have the records of when they were given newspaper accounts on August 6th or August 7th, when they found out about it, about the bombing of Hiroshima, the German nuclear scientists were horrified. They're like, you guys actually did this? Yeah. We stopped doing this. We didn't want Hitler to have a bomb. We don't think you should have a bomb. A bomb is not a good use of this. He created a nuclear reactor. In fact, the Allies shut that reactor down. He created a functioning nuclear reactor. We weren't working on a reactor. He was working on cheap energy for mankind. And that's what he did. And so Here's a lesson. And this is the troubling thing, which Oppenheimer implies. The whole movie has a lot of troubling aspects to it because it doesn't absolve Oppenheimer, nor should it.
No.
But one of the aspects that I think people aren't noticing is that ultimately Oppenheimer wasn't in a race with anybody. There was no need to build his bomb. The Russians didn't have the know-how. The only reason they got the know-how was they had a spy inside Los Alamos who was one of his guys they didn't have the know-how.
Who was actually the British guy that the Americans
liberated
forced them to take. Yeah.
And then we see one of the great dynamics of this movie is the conflict between Oppenheimer and his rival, Edward Teller. Edward Teller is the creator of the hydrogen bomb, much more beyond anything Oppenheimer did. The world can be destroyed by thousands of atom bombs. The world can be destroyed by a handful of hydrogen bombs, right?
Yeah, like a dozen.
Yeah, and that's it. That's all you need. And so Teller was far more dangerous, right? In what he was trying to do. But neither of them is actually fighting an enemy that's going to make this thing. The Germans don't have it. The Japanese don't have it. The Russians won't have it until they started their own. Americans started Los Alamos, and the Russians never got the hydrogen bomb on their own. It was through the Rosenbergs, who were American spies, who were communist spies, who fed it to the only reason they had the plans. The Russians didn't have the know-how for the atom bomb, much less the hydrogen bomb. So this is all the product of the Pandora's box being unleashed. Oppenheimer opens his box that nobody else could open. So the question, should he have done it? Because nobody else could have done it.
Well,
Heisenberg who didn't do it.
Well, Heisenberg claimed that he could have done it later on in life. And I think he probably could have, but he was smart enough to know that this is a bad idea.
Yes.
Right. And, when I did my video on Oppenheimer, I make the mention that throughout his entire process, he was so busy trying to figure out whether he could. He never stopped to think about whether he should.
Correct.
Right. And the neat thing about it is when you actually kind of turn it around and look at Barbie, she's so busy thinking about, everyone is so busy thinking about whether they should, that they need some external force to make them realize that they could. So these are great movies to think about as two sides of the same coin. And usually what happens is when I end one of these, I leave some homework for the audience to think about. I think when you watch Barbie, I want you guys to think about what you guys played with as a kid and what your world as a kid looked like when you were playing with these toys versus what it would look like today.
Yeah.
Right. What issues would it look like today? I mean, I'll give you a perfect example for me. I mean, look, my mom was in the Navy. My dad was in the Army. They competed with GI Joes. They would buy me, my dad would buy more tanks, and then my mom would feel the need to buy more boats. And then my grandfather would come in and buy air stuff just to see who could get the most, air, sea, what have you, to put it all together. So I used to play with GI Joes a lot, and GI Joes were always battling, Cobra and whatnot. Today, most of my GI Joes would probably be playing, trying to put in relief efforts for, some of the really embattled places in the world these days. Right. So that's an example of how it would be different. And I'd like you guys to think about that. And that way you guys can also see too, your own personal progression, how you've grown and how you've changed, because it's important to remember that. And it's also important to remember to have fun and occasionally, maybe try a little pink on for a change, right?
I mean, one of the most fun things I've seen, and we maybe can conclude on this, was when I went to the theaters. I saw my big mall theater in Sherman Oaks Galleria, where I went to see it with my friend. I knew who was going to see Barbie there just in the mall, because the mall was filled with people wearing pink. And this is Los Angeles, so there's a very large Latino community. So you saw these big Mexican dudes wearing pink with their daughters, and they just wanted their daughters to be happy. You get it, someone has a daughter.
I do.
Macho Mexican guys were wearing pink to make their daughters happy. It was a family bonding thing, and it really touched me.
That's it. And that's, ultimately one of the best pieces of this movie is bringing people together. Yeah. So guys, I want to thank you very much for watching this video with us. Please, in the link in the description below is going to be a link to Kamran's Patreon. If you have not yet joined it, please very much consider doing so. The man is amazing. He gets sources and stories from all over, as well as some of the finest writing advice you will ever see. So guys, thank you very much. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Take care, everybody.